Hi, I'm Jeremy Crosby.
And I'm Nick Boucher. We're the hosts for the program that's all about your city, Talking Fitchburg.
Every day, we pull together the news, events, and information you need to stay on top of what's happening in the city of Fitchburg.
Find Talking Fitchburg on cable TV, Roku, Amazon Fire, Apple TV, and our live stream on the web. Plus, you can view all our headlines and stories on Facebook, YouTube, and our video on demand service. This is your city.
Keep up with Talking Fitchburg and the issues that affect you and your neighbors.
Want to know what's happening in your city? Get Notify Me messages from the City of Fitchburg. Visit fitchburgwi.gov on your computer or mobile device and select the big Notify Me button on the left. Enter your email and/or phone number, whichever is best for you to get notifications. Scroll down the list and select all the topics you're interested in to receive email or text messages about. You'll be notified every time one of your topics is updated. Sign up for Notify Me, one more way to keep up with your Fitchburg government.
All right, it is 5:30, and we're going to go ahead and call to order the meeting of the Fitchburg Healthy Neighborhoods Advisory Committee. And we'll get that started by, first item on the list is the approval of last meeting's minutes. Do we have a motion to approve those minutes? Second?
Second.
All right, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
All right, minutes approved. All right, we don't have any public appearances for non-agenda items, so we're going to go right ahead to the agenda review. Tonight, we're going to be looking at the resolution for approving a contract with Dane County to accept the 2024 Neighborhood Navigator funding. That's agenda 5A. And then 5B is going to be a discussion of Healthy Neighborhoods Grant Program and Strategic Plan updates. So with that said, let's go ahead and move right to agenda item 5A.
I will move approval of Resolution R214-24, approving a contract with Dane County to accept the 2024 Neighborhood Navigator funding.
Okay.
Seconded.
All right. Do we need any discussion on that, or?
Just one small clarification.
Sure.
Typo, it should be 25, not 2024.
Yes.
I take responsibility for that one.
All right. Excellent. Okay. Well, we've seconded it, so should we vote on it? I guess we probably should. That's a pretty quick thing. All right. Everybody in favor of approving that contract, or at least approving a recommendation to move forward with that? Aye?
Aye.
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 Any opposed? Nope, it's universal. All right, that's passed. Great. Oof, moving right along. Okay, agenda item 5B. So we're going to talk about the Healthy Neighborhoods Grant Program and Strategic Plan update.
Dana, how do I share my screen?
That would be Scott, and there you go.
Okay, perfect. Oh, thank you. We're going to start with the background on the plan. I can... from my laptop.
What you're showing on your screen is what's going up there.
My screen showing the second slide.
Small delay on the slides.
What's happening? Her screen is showing the second slide, but the video is showing the first slide still. Unsure why that is.
Well, that is undoubtedly going to be an issue on your computer. Are you using your own computer or one of the city computers that we have in the cabinet?
It's a city computer.
It's not one of the
Nope.
No.
No, her. Oh. Yeah, when she unplugged it, the screen did not go blank like it should have, so it must be your issue.
Can I see your settings? Display. Okay,
Pardon our technical
are you,
difficulties.
able to drag your presentation over to the other screen?
To that screen up
Yeah.
here?
Because I think what it's doing is it's showing you your screen, but it's not necessarily duplicate. There you go.
Oh.
Keep going. Keep going.
Oh my.
Or you can tell it to mirror your screen. Would that be easier?
Yeah.
Just put it back where it was. I'm making a big-time appearance in this meeting. Okay, let's go back to your display settings. Okay, now say, instead of extend, say mirror duplicate. You're good to go.
Awesome.
Make sure you hit the keep the changes button.
Oh. There we go. Okay. I think we're good to go now. Here we are. Perfect. All right, so we're going to start with going over a grant program background. So we just wanted to give you guys a little bit of information to understand kind of where the grant started and where it's at now. So it began in 2017, and the city has awarded since 2017 $617,045. So, and that includes 64 individual awards. In 2025, we will have $78,000 available. I wanted to point out on this graph down here, the averages throughout these past years, and the average is around 76,000 here at the end. So we are still, for 2025, we are still projected above the average. I wanted to give an update also about the surveys that we put out a couple months back, and for the grant, we got 8 responses, and I just wanted to give some overall themes of those surveys. So the biggest themes that we saw is that respondents found the application reporting process was easy and the deadlines were clear, and everyone was overall satisfied with the application reporting process. Their concerns were that a later application opening would reduce time to use the funds. Some considerations that that the city wanted to bring about to you guys are the number of grants awarded. So this year, we are anticipating to get more applications than we did last year, and we have less funding than we did last year, so the committee will have to take into consideration how many people can be awarded in this upcoming grant cycle. So some things to consider while we're going through the grant allocation process are the program focus areas, application evaluation criteria. We can discuss how we can possibly make this easier to decide which grants to fund, and then potentially doing partial funding for individual grants. If we want to keep doing that, or if we want to focus on fully funding the $15,000 that is the max available. Do we want to talk about this now, or do we want to finish the presentation and then answer questions at the end?
I think we can probably run through the rest of the presentation and maybe gather the rest of the questions at the end.
Okay. The city also wanted to give an update of the strategic plan schedule. So we've created a master document of our planning process for the strategic plan. From December until January, we will be collecting and analyzing some data. So that includes looking at the census maps. Right now, I am conducting stakeholder interviews. So that includes talking with the nonprofits, and then we will also host focus groups and steering committee meetings. Along with those not included in this, we have director interviews, which have mostly been completed. Then into February and April, we'll be doing strategy and program development. So this includes looking at all of that data that we've collected, developing strategies and programs to promote and address issues and create an implementation plan and benchmarks. So that way the city's able to make sure that they are reaching their goals according to the plan. And then in May and July, we will draft the plan and have a final review and approval of the plan. So that includes holding an open house. The committee will review the plan, and then there will be a final council review in July, tentatively. For the grant schedule, it's pretty similar to last year. So January 8th, we will review the grant application materials to see if there's any changes that we would like to make. Then on the 10th, the revised application materials will be made available to the public. Continuing into November, on Valentine's Day, the applications will be due. Into March, applicants will present to the committee, and then March 12th, the committee will complete the scoring. And at the end of March, council refers the grants. On April 2nd, the committee will review and approve the grants, and then April 8th, the council approves the grants, and we will send an award announcement. The meeting schedule for the upcoming year, again, is pretty similar to last year. We'll meet on Wednesdays at 5:30, so January 8th. I just wanted to give an overview of what the meeting structure will look like. So January 8th, we'll review those application materials. February 5th, we will do a strategic plan working session. Then in March, the grant applicants will present to the committee. April, there will be a review and approval of the grants. June and July will be the presentation for the 2024 grantees. And we can discuss this. As I've gone and talked with the nonprofits, there has been some apprehension about the mid-year grants and maybe that there's a more efficient way for this to happen. And then in August, there'll be a mid-year check-in for the 2025 grantees, and October 1st, we will talk more about the strategic plan implementation and how that is moving along.
I'm not clear on what this June 4th and July 2nd presentations are. And maybe my memory is just hazy, which does happen from time to time. But since we will have already approved the grants on April 2nd, right? Mm-hmm. Oh, this is not a typo.
Traditionally,
so we're asking the people who received grants in 2024 to come in the middle of summer and do a presentation to us of what they did.
Correct.
This summer being their busiest possible time. It would seem that we would want to do that before then, like maybe in February or March.
I think the hard thing is that our February and March meetings are typically pretty packed full of the application and discussion process for the awarding decision making. So I'm not sure if we could facilitate that in those same meeting slots.
Maybe not, but gosh, it just seems 6 months after. I mean, presumably we're sitting here in December, and presumably all the programs that were awarded for 2024 are done. Correct? The people who received grant awards. So, I mean, this would be a great time for them to come in, because I'm sure they're not doing many things in these neighborhoods right now. And we don't have a December, this is our December meeting, so it just seems to me asking them to come back here, you know, to be able to put a presentation together and to come back here at the time that they're generally going to be working in these neighborhoods. I would rather have them putting their time in June and July into working in the neighborhoods than coming and telling us what great things they did.
A potential solution could be that there are approximately 12 company or grant recipients from 2024, and if we have 4 meetings, January, February, March, April, then maybe we could have like 3 applicants come each time or something like that, you know, kind of like spread it out a little bit more. But maybe we could try to find a middle ground there.
Or, you know, if everyone on this committee is amenable to it, we could just have a second meeting in February or March and get rid of the June or July meetings.
The feedback I had received so far from the individuals, the grantees, is that they found the presentations to be redundant when they're already doing a lot of reporting to us. So I guess the question is, does the committee feel like the presentations are worthwhile?
I can say that historically I have not exactly had access to the final reports in a timely manner. So like I found the presentations useful just because I didn't see their final reports, like me personally as a committee member. So the only thing that I got to see was the presentations for some people, and that was really helpful to actually see something. But if we could have those reports be made available, then, you know, maybe, you know, that could be helpful too, or alternatively.
When do those reports get turned into us?
The end of January, I believe. Deanna, was that correct? January 31st?
It's when the reports are due.
So in the February, March, and April meetings, we don't have any time where we are reviewing those reports.
Not how it's laid out here. There's nothing set in stone. Certainly we can change, and whatever's most useful for the committee in doing their work.
What do they do in those presentations that's significantly different than what they put in the report?
The reports are pretty text heavy and data heavy. They're not terribly pleasant to read. And so what's cool about the presentations, you get to see a little bit more of the real life of how these dollars are working, right? Because they can talk about some of the stories and share the pictures. So it can make for an interesting presentation.
Well, can we change that report? Can we change the requirements of that report so it's less a burden on them, and so then maybe they'd be more willing to come and do the presentation?
We certainly can. The committee, we would have to work through the documents to see what we would like to change.
Yeah, it's probably too late to do it for 2024 right now.
Yeah, for 24, that's all been set in stone.
Yeah.
But certainly for 25, we've suggested that on January 8th, we would have the grant application materials, including the reporting requirements, available for discussion, and we can make changes going into 2025 up until really when we release it to the public.
Can y'all hear me? Okay. I would just like to kind of agree with I think that what I would like to be thinking about what we're asking of the people who are receiving grants, and I'm still feel new to the process. However, it feels like a lot that we're asking in relationship to how much money that we're providing, not to minimize the. And so I would really love to kind of rethink. And if the report is really text heavy, then maybe we can minimize the text heaviness of it. And that can also mean that they're easier for us to read, and maybe not another evening that we're asking folks to come and spend their night here with us. So I really like that sort of impulse to think about how much we're asking of folks, including the presentations, and see if we can streamline the process. One thing I was thinking about earlier was, though the people who ended up receiving grants didn't feel that the process was that cumbersome, I know we've had people who haven't applied for funding because of the process. And so I think we're not hearing the feedback, obviously, of people who didn't choose to go ahead with the process. So yeah, I think any way we can kind of minimize the burden would be great.
Another potential consideration would be to request that these recipients create a digital version of like a presentation, like you can record via like Loom or something, your screen plus you talking over it, and submit that. Make it maybe optional. We could play around with that, but so that they don't have to actually come in during their busy season, they could still present to us. And then I do sometimes find value in asking questions. And so that would be the one thing that would be missing from that process.
Yeah, we can certainly look at doing all of those things. I will say that I think that they don't mind coming in and giving the presentations. So if the committee feels like that is useful and is something that they would like, then we can continue to do that and restructure to see when a better time would be for them. Also, looking at the application process, I have heard mixed reviews on it. I've heard where some people are like, it's just a lot for us. We're a small nonprofit, and others have said, it's for the amount of funding we've received, we feel like it's manageable. So in January, we can definitely look over those grant application materials and make changes to them for 2025 as we see applicable.
I guess my only point regarding those presentations really is that not only for us on the committee, but also it provides an opportunity for the public via FACTv to be able to tune in to a presentation of what's happening rather than having to try to seek out the reports, which again are very text heavy and dry and can be somewhat difficult to sort of take in. So I see value in those presentations in letting the public know where that money is going and which organizations are providing services in the community and what they've done. Which can not only let them know just for edification purposes, but it can also spark an understanding that this grant program exists and maybe they want to do something in the community and they see an organization doing it and they're saying, oh, maybe I should attempt to find more information about this, and maybe an organization that I'm a part of or am starting up can apply next year. So I don't know that I'm super comfortable with completely eliminating those presentations, but I like the idea of maybe splitting them up with multiple presenters every few meetings in the springtime, or whenever is more convenient for the grant awardees to provide us with some of that information. It doesn't have to be a live presentation, so Ari, like you said, if we can make it possible for them to simply record something like that and provide it, that's something that could maybe be played during one of these meetings. So something to consider.
Yeah, and like I said, the other option that we considered was if staff. If the committee didn't want to have the presentations, which it sounds like you very much do, but that staff could have the kind of like interviews with them and the presentations with them if we felt like there just wasn't enough time in the schedule. But with you guys expressing a lot of interest, I think it's definitely doable. And then we also did talk about having them record their presentations and sending them in to make it a little easier on them to still provide those presentations, but not have it be so much of a time burden. Is there any more questions about the meeting schedule?
Yes. I have 2 questions / comments about previous slides. So if you go back to where it says grant program considerations, program focus areas, I think that discussion, when we discuss it in January, would be great to kind of think about our strategic plan, and maybe I don't know if we're going to revamp like which our pillars are, or make other modifications to the strategic plan, but I think that those 2 conversations ought to be kind of thoughtful in how they are interconnected. And then on the next slide, you said stakeholder interviews and focus groups. And I know you mentioned that you're going to be having interviews with stakeholders, and you mentioned grant recipients. And I'm wondering if, in addition to that, there's a way to get data from other sources. So like, for example, I know in the past we looked at UW Hospital for health-related data. We also, potentially could be looking at interviews with like residents. So I just kind of was wondering, like, is there more to it than just interviewing the service providers?
Yes, there is.
Thank you.
The residents are definitely included in this process, and my plan is to work with all of you to have, when it talks about focus groups, hopefully a focus group for each of our priority neighborhoods, so that we make sure each of their voices is heard in the update of this plan. And then when you talked about UW Health, I reached out to Katya, and we've had an interview and a discussion, and she works with cows, which has a new name, but it's associated with UW, and so she gave me a lot of good resources to go find data based on health and environmental factors as well. So this was just more of a high level. I didn't want to give you guys the whole plan because the master plan is decently heavy, and I figured this was a little bit more digestible.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Any more questions on this slide at the moment? Okay, we'll keep going. Oh, and then just questions, comments about any of it. So if there's no more questions about the slides, then I'll let Ryan talk about what's on the agenda item next.
If we don't have, as a committee, any more questions, I guess we do have a couple of people who have signed up to speak, so we can maybe jump to that. I don't see anybody with their hand raised online. Okay. All right. Well, I guess why don't we go with the first person in the pile, which would be you, Bill. Bill Jetzer. Welcome.
Is it on now?
It is. We can hear you.
Okay. All right. I am Bill Jetzer. I'm an alder in District 2. And at the November 26th council meeting, I voted against the plan to put 4 drive-through businesses on the northwest corner of McKee Road and Fish Hatchery Road, right across from the PD from the Super Target. I lost that fight. But the mayor suggested that I come here tonight, since you're updating your strategic plan for the priority neighborhoods, that I should weigh in on the types of developments that I feel are appropriate for the priority neighborhoods. I'll start by noting that 40% of Fitchburg residents do not drive. If you subtract all the people who are too young to drive, that still leaves, of the remaining 85% or so, it still leaves about 30% of people who are non-drivers. I suspect that that percentage is significantly higher in the priority neighborhoods and lower elsewhere. So it seems to me that the way to go is to build walkable neighborhoods, which is to say, you step out your door and within 5 to 10 minutes, you can walk to any number of amenities to go about your day without needing to jump in a car. So this is, typically mixed use, vertical mixed use. You'll see, retail on the ground floor, housing on the top. This is similar to the way Madison is building up a lot of development along the BRT routes, for instance. And to be clear, this is not just a vision for the priority neighborhoods. This would be my preference for everywhere in the city. This is the smartest way to grow as a city. It's better for people's physical health. If you live in a walkable neighborhood, you are significantly less likely to be obese or have diabetes. It's better for your mental health, being outdoors in the fresh air. And studies have shown that people who walk or bike or take transit while commuting are significantly happier than people who are driving cars. It's better for your personal finances. If you don't need to be burdened by car ownership, that saves you thousands of dollars per year. It's better for the city's finances. If we develop densely, we don't need to build a lot of new roads, water, sewer. The per acre property taxes are maximized with this sort of development. It's obviously better for the environment. If we're going to put 100 housing units on 1 acre versus 100 on 50 acres, you're not gobbling up farmland, you're not building new roads, water, sewer, etc. And in fact, Dutch studies have shown that for every dollar you spend on walkable, bikeable infrastructure, you'll likely get about $20 on the back end savings in healthcare costs. Our comprehensive plan has goals, objectives, and policies that say we should be building compact urban communities based on mixed-use, transit-oriented development that aims to reduce automobile dependency. We've also got a sustainability plan. One of the goals within that plan is to reduce vehicle miles traveled. My specific issues with this particular development are that this location is relatively unique within Fitchburg. From the corner of Fitzrona and McKee, it's less than a 10-minute walk to Target, Hy-Vee, Aldi, Goodwill, etc. There's restaurants there and other businesses as well. Drive-throughs with their massive parking lots and constant traffic coming in and out is openly hostile to pedestrians. And this corner is also served by not one but 2 bus lines, the north-south D2 line and the east-west 75. Drive-through businesses, these things have floor area ratios. The building takes up about 10% of the property and the parking lot takes up about 90%. This is not the highest and best use of any land anywhere within a city. It's not going to generate a lot of property tax revenue for the city. Building these things facilitates and encourages further car dependency at a time when, the climate demands we not do that. And obviously, if everybody's in their cars, this does not build community like a walkable neighborhood would. These services, the businesses here are also somewhat redundant. Walk across the street, you've got access to 10 restaurants, and within 2/3 of a mile of this location, there are 2 other car washes. And as a side note, various cities across the country have been banning drive-throughs for years. Names you'd recognize: South Los Angeles, Minneapolis, and Atlanta, and there's others that you probably haven't heard of, but this is not just my idea. Yeah, I think that's about everything that was on my list here, and I've probably exceeded my 3-minute limit, but I thank you for your time.
You did, but thank you, Bill. That's good information for us to take into account and consider. And I think as a committee, that's something that maybe we could look at having discussions on in the future, should the committee decide to do that, to talk more about making additional recommendations to the Common Council about other issues in the city that affect the Healthy Neighborhoods Initiative and the desire for those priority neighborhoods to have a well-rounded community, as Bill said, a walkable community sort of concept. So maybe something to look at for next year. Okay. Yeah.
Pardon the potentially stupid question. Which committee in the city of Fitchburg deals with like the what do I want to say, the codes or the
zoning, maybe?
Yes, that is exactly the word I'm looking for. Thank you. The zoning.
The Plan Commission.
I would love to have more information from the Plan Commission, or at least have us take a look at any of the information that the Plan Commission has already made readily available to the public, as far as, you know, what are they planning for our priority neighborhoods?
Well, the best resource for that is the comprehensive plan, which is available on the city's website to download. It's very detailed. And this has nothing to do with Deanna, but fortunately, at the time that our comprehensive plan was originally developed, Tom Havel, who was the city planner, I mean, he was painstaking in the way he put that plan together. There are communities in this state that have comprehensive plans that are 4 or 5 or 6 pages long, and ours is probably, 130, 140? It's very, very detailed about what we were planning for the future, and there's just a lot of really good information in there. Some of it's probably dated now, but there's a lot of good demographic information in there too.
And I'm happy to point out some good resources. Of course, a couple of the priority neighborhoods are covered by specific neighborhood plans. So Verona Road West is covered by the Anton Redevelopment Neighborhood Guide. So, and then Southdale, of course, has its own planning document too. So those are tools that we use in planning and zoning, those neighborhood plans. And I'm happy to send an email that would kind of lay out where you can access that information.
That would be really appreciated. I'm going to also mention that I pretty much have next to no baseline knowledge of zoning. So if you start sending me documents about zoning plans, I'm going to be like way over my head, and I would love to learn for the benefit of the city of Fitchburg, but I would need something maybe a little bit more introductory.
I won't send you zoning. I will send you our future planning documents. We use zoning as a tool, one of our tools for implementation of those planning documents, and happy to give a tutorial to anyone who's interested on zoning, but I think a good place to start is our overall neighborhood plans, and that offers some guide of how we think about future development.
The comprehensive plan is not a zoning document. There is some technical information in there regarding sewer interceptors and stuff like that you may not be all that interested in, but it's all divided into sections that you can you know, you can kind of pick and choose the stuff you want to read about. And there is information in there. There's not as much information in there about Southdale because Southdale was still a twinkle in our eye at the time that that document was put together. But the other, our other healthy neighborhoods are addressed to some degree within that document. So, and of course, you know, I was there when we wrote it, so you can always contact me.
Okay. All right. I guess any other discussion on that? No? All right. We have one other person who registered and dropped off some written comments, and I'm not quite sure how to proceed. So, Deanna, you might need to help me here. There's 3 pages of comments, and his request was that we read them into the record and include them in the meeting minutes. I'm not sure what the requirements are for that.
Can you give just for the general public and all of us, just a brief overview without reading everything through?
Sure.
We will definitely include it in our agenda minutes and background.
Sure.
And we'll include it in the official documentation, but maybe you can give us a quick start of it or read part of it.
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of questions that were asked by this person. Most of them, I think, boil down to questions of authority of the commission and of the city to actually administer the grant program, whether it's legal or not, in addition to questions about how the funds are utilized and whether they're being utilized in a way that is both legal but also well governed and responsibly documented. So there's lots of requests to explain certain amounts of funding to different organizations, as well as whether or not these are, again, legal. There's a lot of information. Looks like it was an item that was also emailed to the mayor as well as members of the city staff. So I'm guessing that it's essentially just a reorganization of that email.
Okay. I think that's sufficient. We'll
Okay.
include it in the record.
Sure.
Who is it from?
Registered person was David Halford.
It doesn't look like it was sent to the whole council, so.
Okay. Well, either way, it's a detailed list of questions and commentary, and I think it certainly should be included in the meeting minutes. But most of the questions that I'm seeing here are questions that our committee, in particular, probably could not answer. They're beyond the scope of what we are able to answer, but appreciate the input from the public. Yeah, so those are the only 2 public commentary for the agenda items. So that ends that section of our agenda. So we move on to report from department.
I have
Oh, well, we were going to jump into census stuff.
census and then the discussion. I've typed up some questions to talk about the strategic plan.
Oh, sure, yes. Also, Ari, you wanted to share your screen at some point, right? Was that at the end of this portion?
It's whenever. This could be an appropriate time to do it.
Yeah.
Should we start with census and then move to the questions?
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay, excellent.
Ari, would you like to start with the the data you have, or should we start?
Sure, yeah, I'm just trying to, yeah, okay, there we go. The share screen option was not being wonderful. Here we go. Okay, so I recently did some research. Okay, I guess we're going to be displaying my screen at some point. I was doing some research on where the...
He's
saying it's not plugged in.
He's saying it's not
you
plugged
probably need to plug into this one.
Oh, I have to plug into this one.
No, not that one. That's the right one. Yeah.
I'll try unplugging and replugging.
Yeah.
Okay. See if it's there now.
Nothing.
Oh, fun.
Do you have screen mirroring on? It's up in one of those tabs.
Oh, yeah, I do have screen mirroring on. Wait, no, I don't.
Yeah, that's going to have to be on.
Built-in display. Oh, yeah, no, it's set. It's mirror. Optimize for...
You should have something there right now.
Oh, is it there?
There we go.
Look at that.
There it is.
Oh, amazing. All right, display settings. Lovely.
Okay.
Okay, so I was looking at data, and the thing that wound up standing out to me, well, a couple of things. One was that the census blocks did not match up pretty much at all with our healthy neighborhoods. So a lot of the data that I could find online wasn't super helpful to me. But some things that were helpful to me in questioning where should these healthy neighborhoods be drawn? Where should the boundaries be drawn? That was the question that I was asking myself. And I found this, I emailed about this on the map, census.gov, and I wanted to briefly show this map and how it relates to another map that I found, which is air quality, because it was a very interesting connection that I thought would benefit us to be aware of. So if you start with on the map, what you can do is you can search in the left-hand side for Fitchburg, Wisconsin, and it will pop up with that as an option as the city, let's see, places, Fitchburg, Wisconsin, there it goes. And then you can perform analysis on the selection area. And so this is really wonderful. You can ask, do I want to have people who work in the city of Fitchburg or people who live in the city of Fitchburg? And what I was asking myself is, of the people who live in the city of Fitchburg, the workers who receive $1,250 per month or less, where do they live? And so you can look at this historical data as well, click a couple of different years, and it will show you this heat map of where people live. And something that is somewhat interesting is that if you go back to, say, 2012, you'll notice that this neighborhood, for example, in the bottom right corner of Fitchburg is light blue, and by the time 2020 rolls around, it will be darker blue. You'll also wind up noticing that this medium blue color does disappear, which is, or shrink, which is a nice sign. So you can kind of look at that. And that is interesting, but what's more interesting to me, well, okay, and sorry, briefly, I will show that I have outlined our healthy neighborhoods, and it doesn't super match up. It kind of matches up a little bit, but there are definitely areas that don't match up with our lines. And what was really interesting was that this map that I found online from firststreet.org, I have no idea if it's accurate data, but the J kind of looking area in the middle of Fitchburg that was very interesting to me, if we look back, we see this J kind of area in the middle of Fitchburg, maps up very well with this air quality map, as well as all the other challenges. And so these were the two maps that I found online that actually provided data that weren't just in the census blocks, because, for example, like, I mean, these our neighborhoods just don't match up with census blocks. So if you try and like analyze it that way, it doesn't really give anything useful. But these pieces of data were interesting. And so that all leads me to ask, you know, how are we defining the boundaries, and would it make sense to use other data in order to define boundaries that, for example, could potentially include this J-shaped area in the middle of Fitchburg, or potentially could include the little dot and the bottom right. And so those are my questions, and that is the end of my presentation. Any questions?
Awesome presentation there. I do have a few questions because I cannot really visually see the graphs very clearly here. I'm not sure how the legends are defined and the density map is being drawn. So I know there's a legend to the bottom left, especially for the dark blue one. I'm not sure what the metrics definition for those density maps are in particular. And, you know, what other factors are we actually putting into consideration outside of the income bracket that you've mentioned, and as well as residents versus workers?
Yeah, those are great questions about, you know, other factors. I don't know. As far as the legend, I know it's really small. I'm sorry. It says this darker of dark blues that we see is about 149 to 259 jobs per square miles that are these low income, less than $12.50 per month jobs. And then we've got the lighter blue that's kind of in this area right here is 69 to 148 jobs per square mile that are the low income jobs. And then we've got actually maybe I'm looking at my blues wrong. Okay, so I guess the latest
and also
of light
keep
blues
in
is
mind
5 to 20. So yeah,
keep in mind this, the map also keep in comparison to the population density of those particular region as well as a factor of ratio as those job income limitations. And it would be nice to see how we personally within the Fitchburg city and within the HNAC actually draw our, you know, high priority zone. So that's a fair question, and I'm glad that you're able to actually find other resources that can serve as a comparison as we do this job. So great job. Thank you.
Yeah, and I really appreciate you asking about other factors because, for example, it says over here that in on the right-hand side of this view, in 2022, 16% of the people who lived in Fitchburg but had a low-income job were over the age of 55. And, you know, for example, are they trying to not reach some sort of income maximum so that they no longer get Social Security benefits? You know, there's like a multitude of factors. Like, is this actually a problem? I don't know. But it is data. So.
Well, so in your this section, can you move your cursor to there? Yeah. Nope. This one right here.
Ah, yes.
So that's Swan Creek.
Okay.
And Swan Creek is 100% residential. There are no businesses there. There are no jobs there.
Uh-huh.
So, and there probably aren't going to be because it's all built out now, or the last section of it is building out. So there aren't going to be any of those jobs there, and that's a neighborhood where it's mostly single family. There are some apartments, there are some townhouses, but the single family houses there are going for in the $400,000 to $500,000 range. So I'm not sure. I mean, I'm not sure how to use this data usefully because that's not a neighborhood that's in need of our committee's help. As far as the other neighborhoods, the ones that we actually have, I'm sure that when the boundaries were drawn up, because I wasn't here when the boundaries were actually drawn, but I'm sure the boundaries were drawn based on where the roads are. So, like Southdale is Southdale, and that's just, the boundaries of the Southdale neighborhood. And the area up on Fish Hatchery Road, that's the area in the city of Fitchburg. And the roads go kind of crazy there because Madison was taking bites out of Fitchburg, which is why the northern boundary looks so weird, because Fitchburg originally was just a big square. So, and you can see over on the other side where Madison basically carved out Allied Drive, and they took Allied Drive, but the areas on either side, so Chalet Gardens, which is on the western side, and all the other neighborhoods, Thurston Lane, what are the other streets over there? I can't remember.
Renaissance on the Park.
Renaissance on the Park. Those areas were not taken by Madison when... now, keep in mind, that boundary change happened a long time ago. So at the time that happened, I think Chalet was there. Chalet was approved under county zoning. But Renaissance on the Park was a Fitchburg development that we built later on. So, so I'm sure the boundaries were based on where the roads are, not on census blocks. And census blocks are weird. I mean, I served on a redistricting committee 2 censuses ago, and when you do the redistricting, that has to be done based on census blocks. But you have to. We have one ward in the city of Fitchburg that has 0 residents. Just because...
Oh, yes, I found that.
Yes.
Oh my gosh, Ward 22.
Yeah.
I have that data.
Yes.
Oh my gosh, that was ridiculous.
Yeah, and it's just, there's nobody who lives there. It's mostly wetland.
Yes.
Yeah.
Ward 22.
There it is.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
So
0 people.
There's nobody there. But you create some issues because when you start putting together wards that have very few people, you kind of take the anonymity out of the vote, and so that's one of the things you have to be careful with. But the voter participation map that
Well, I think
anyway.
Definitely,
here it is.
Regardless of whether that particular information is super useful in trying to drill down into the reasons why certain priority neighborhoods are the shape that they are, it begs the question, would the committee be well served by digging deeper into the background of how the priority neighborhoods were shaped, what their boundaries look like, and whether or not over time those may need to be updated as part of the plan and how that works. I'm not sure how that process functions, but I'm curious now, because populations move over time and demographics shift over time, and so it certainly is useful to review that and to determine whether or not the neighborhoods that are in the plan are still the neighborhoods that need support, and are they shaped correctly? Do they try to encompass the neighborhood areas and the populations that need the most help?
Which is potentially a wonderful transition into Deanna's information.
Yeah, I just want to give just a little brief overview. It looks like what was done for the original priority neighborhoods, CARP-C had identified about 10 barriers to opportunity. So these are variables of percent non-white persons, percent poverty, below poverty line, percentage of limited English proficiency. But anyways, I'm not going to walk all the way through there. But using those variables, which you would normally kind of understand, households with food stamps, they identified 8 block groups in Fitchburg that were ranked poorly in terms of these variables. So they identified those 8 block groups and then kind of classified them into the 4 neighborhoods is how they did it.
And can you explain one more time? You said where the data was from. I forgot the name that you just said, but
yeah, actually
what are the
you
blocks?
can read all about this right in the strategic plan on page 2. Yeah. It just says that the variables that they looked at, and then when they were ranked on these various variables, they identified 8 block groups. Now, it looks like what they did then, because these block groups, as you well know, do not match the boundaries of our current priority neighborhoods, it appears that what they did in... I didn't even know you had me on. Sorry. It appears what they did is to eliminate the areas that did not have housing. So these areas along McKee are all industry and commercial development. So it looks like they approximately followed those census blocks, but kind of massaged the boundaries a little bit. So this does bring a very good question. Staff can do our very best to look at those same variables that were identified in this document, and then relook at which of those block groups would qualify. Probably will be pretty similar. Certainly, we can go through that process to the best of our abilities. I'm saying that because to our best of our abilities, because sometimes, so this data was based on 2010 U.S. Census and Wisconsin Capital Region, Housing Equity Assessment, and then the ACS. Over time, some of this data might not be equivalent. 10 years later, things change in the data world, but we certainly do our best to identify those variables and work with those census tracts in a similar way.
That sounds wonderful. I don't know if we're transitioning into the part where we talk about the strategic plan, but I know in that analysis, there were these barrier thresholds, and the strategic plan didn't give me enough insight into how those barrier thresholds were determined, especially considering that I would have chosen different barrier thresholds if given the chance. So yeah, I don't know if this is the portion where we talk about the stuff, but yeah, that's one of the things.
I don't have any further information other than this was based on a document that CARP-C had put together. So that would be the Capital Area Regional Plan Commission. And we can certainly do some research, Jessica and I, to dig out a little bit more information. I do not believe that Fitchburg came up with those numbers ourselves. I think that those numbers came from CARP-C.
I can start, like I said, I have a list of questions to kind of get the conversation going about the strategic plan that I sent all of you. So the initial question is, what is the committee's overall thoughts on the strategic plan that the city has currently?
Ari has a boatload.
Ari does have a boatload. I'm fine with other people speaking first, but well, okay. So I felt that this strategic plan had a lot of good information in it, but it was kind of a little bit all over the place. So I actually had a recommendation on how to potentially organize it a little bit better and maybe have, like a table of contents that would first have resolutions, and we would need to add the new resolution that extended us past our 5 years. We would then maybe have pillars. Then we would maybe talk about vision and mission. And I did not really see a section right now that had vision and mission. I saw a few things that I wound up circling eventually that I was like, oh, maybe this could go into our vision and mission for the committee. But those were not, vision and mission were not called out, and that could be a useful section. And then I said the data, old and new. I wanted to actually have data because in this strategic plan, even in the appendix, I never really got much like actual data. And then at the end, I was recommending action items, which is where we had in the past, like promotion people. I don't remember everything that was listed, but so those were the that was the structure that I was recommending. But yes, overall, I would say I would love for the strategic plan document to have more structure so that I could actually find what I'm looking for.
Yeah, I think from my own reading of it, the table of contents could probably, at the very least, be fleshed out a little bit more with some additional bullet points, so that way it's easier to figure out where items are in sections. So that way, or either that or the layout of it to be tabbed differently, so you can scroll through it and more easily identify specific zones as you're scrolling through it, because there's a lot of pages. That's been my biggest thing, trying to flip through it to find the data, and then if I'm looking at a page that's 20 pages down, and I'm like, okay, now I need to go back up to the other page, and I'm trying to flip back and forth, it can be difficult. I don't have a printed version like you do, Ari. That actually, the printed copy might almost be better in that regard, because you can keep the one page. You can put a bookmark in it, a literal bookmark.
So when I was going through this, one of the links that you had sent out, I couldn't open. It wouldn't open. The one that did open was for a March 2019 document.
Did you get the same email as everyone?
Yes, that's the same one. It was adopted March 12, 2019.
Okay. So this one does not reference the Southdale neighborhood at all. So we're going to need to put we're going to need to put a section in about that.
Mm-hmm.
I just wasn't sure if there was something more current.
No, this is the initial plan when it was created back in 2017. So Southdale was not included in the original plan.
I also found the indicators table kind of hard to kind of understand or like visually look through. So I would
Page are you referencing, Ari? Can you input
sure.
the page
So there's
number, please?
page like 20 and 21 and 22 and 23. Yeah, that's the end of it. It felt hard to read through. I would love kind of reconsidering how we format that maybe. Potentially, the pillars and pillar principles and examples could be like elsewhere, and then, maybe we could have tables for just the pillar, the indicator, and why it's important, something like that. But just maybe kind of, that was a struggle for me.
If we don't have any more initial thoughts, we can move on to the second question, which is how well do you think that this current plan aligns with the needs of the community? And I know we've already talked about including Southdale, which it will be included in the updated plan. But for the rest of the plan, how well does the committee feel like the current plans aligns with the needs the community is seeing now?
Well, you know, this table that Ari was just referring to on pages 20 to 23, I'm not sure why this is a table. I mean, it's there's no recommendations in this table because that's not its purpose. But it seems like the stuff that's in here is good information, but putting it in this table format makes it really hard to grasp. So it seems like this would be more suited to, well, for example, under the section that says healthy landscapes and work to build walkable neighborhoods that have diverse land uses, high quality and diverse housing stock, and adequate gathering places. That right there is a sentence that has zero meaning. It doesn't mean a darned thing. And then it says example activities programs. So human-scaled mixed land use developments, mixed income residential developments, housing maintenance improvement programs. Again, this is just a word salad that somebody put together thinking that they were getting somewhere. I think this is rather than having this as a table, especially in this section, but even in some of the other ones, this would be an area where having a picture of what a healthy landscape looks like, maybe a picture of what's there now and a picture of what we would like it to become, that would be helpful. Because otherwise this is just all a bunch of stuff that's got a lot of planning jargon, but doesn't, for somebody who doesn't know what this means, it's not gonna help.
I think what we really are trying to highlight here is the template factor. I still find some of the information here relatively helpful in terms of properly describing how the pillars align with actual examples. In as much as you just literally, highlighted, and you are correct, some of those indicators and examples are not the best to use to best describe what the principal pillar is actually focusing on. However, I think this is just a template issue that we can easily modify and adopt and make changes to. With regards to the actual question, which was the question number 2, how well does the current plan align with the needs of the community? I think the conversation around the data points that Ari kind of mentioned earlier in the discussion would be a key point of focus to be able to answer question number 2. So I see there's an appendix here from CARPS. I think evaluating that metrics and looking at the characteristics and seeing if those are the right metrics that we want to stick to, looking at the current data, since this is from 2027 to 2011, seeing if we can get newer data would be very much helpful in determining if the plan that we have in front of us right now actually does fit the need of the community currently.
I will say with the new plan, the data will definitely be updated. And these questions are more gaining an understanding, I guess, where you guys are seeing the needs are in the community so that we can start the conversation there when we go to update the plan to ensure that we're looking at where the needs are and then potentially where the city can help bring resources to those needs.
I would like to assume that the needs should be data-driven, and the data should be presented and evaluated first for us to best attribute the needs to the neighborhood, rather than personal suggestions or personal evaluations of the neighborhood.
I completely agree, and I spent a lot of time thinking about, what variables are missing. So I have like a whole list of recommended indicators or variables or whatever you want to call it. It probably wouldn't be useful to just like list all of them right now, but I do think that we have some variables that could potentially be useful to add. And then I love the idea of actually looking at that data and then using that data to drive, what are the pieces of data that we actually like need to be concerned about. Yeah.
I had another concern on the maps. Let's go to page 4. So on this page, we have color-coded a bunch of existing land uses, but these color codes that are on the map do not match up with the key down at the bottom. For example, you've got, along the northern edge of this map, you've got a whole bunch of this brown color, but that doesn't show up in the key. And then along Williamsburg Way, you've got all this green here, which I presume are the duplexes that are on Williamsburg Way. There's duplexes and 4 units there.
For the benefit of the screen share, can you recommend that they scroll one more page down?
One more page, page 14. There we go. Oh. Well, this is different than, no, I think that's the same thing.
Yeah, I think it's just the coloration of the display.
Well, yeah, but there's some of these colors don't exist. Yeah, that's what I've got. So, this is not, it's a technical thing. It's just something to make sure that we have better coloration when we do this, when we put this out there.
So it looks like it's template.
I also was thinking about this is still along the lines of question number 2, like, are these the needs of our neighborhoods? And these pillars are very generic. And I was wondering if we need to think a little bit more about what are the needs of adults versus adolescents versus kids in these neighborhoods, especially considering that I found census data suggesting that Verona Road West and Belmar Renaissance on the Park had the vast majority of Fitchburg's population that is under age 18. With the other 2 priority neighborhoods having like pretty much like the rest of the kids in Fitchburg. And that means that these parts of Fitchburg may have, different needs than other parts of Fitchburg. Childcare being a primary example, early Head Start programs, blah, blah, blah. But yeah, so just kind of thinking about like, what do adults need, what do adolescents need, and what do kids need? I'd love to have us put some thought to that.
Thanks for that insight, Ari. I would also like to provide additional insight to that for us to also keep in mind that the pillars should be as high level overview as much as possible, so we don't bottleneck our discussion and selection of grants and approval and discussion around that and narrow ourselves down into a handicap position. And we want to try to be as broad as possible, and that way we can incorporate different needs into the same pillar as much as possible without having too many pillars and keeping them as high overview as possible.
Yeah, I agree. I'd be very careful about trying to limit the number of items in a given pillar unless it's something that is demonstrably not needed in a neighborhood. Keeping as much in the plan as possible and looking to add things that maybe aren't in existence more so than eliminate or further refine might be useful.
One sort of other thought on that, because I'm looking at the pillars, which I agree they're not just broad. I think depending on the audience, a lot of people won't make a connection between the pillars and their daily lives. So I think that there's that piece, and maybe that's not the purpose, is to communicate what we do to a broader audience. But when I look at the next page, page 1, what are healthy neighborhoods and why are they important? That graphic, I think, is very concrete. So sorry, I'll wait. So. It's my page at the top. Yeah, so the red boxes there, right? Those to me are the sort of concrete things where I think we're communicating in some ways, and maybe I'm not, understanding the purpose of that graphic, but that's much more like the concrete. What do neighborhoods? What do these things? What do the pillars look like? Because I just think about do the pillars address needs of the neighborhood? I mean, data is really important. I know my neighborhood needs are food and to not be afraid of being evicted, right? And so I think that the pillars are helpful in guiding us, and there's some very basic needs that maybe aren't as communicated through the pillars, if that makes sense.
So long as we're talking about that graphic on page 1, I guess, ish of the document, the graphic that you were talking about.
Yep.
Caitlin.
Yep.
I really liked this graphic. I felt like it was kind of missing a component. So we've got the two components, social and economic components, and then environmental components. And then I was thinking I'm not quite sure how to phrase it, but healthy people. And underneath that we would have belonging, a sense of belonging, and then medical, eating, working out, walking, doctor visits, are we visiting the ED versus visiting PCP, primary care physicians. Healthy people was something that I was thinking about.
Yeah, that's a good point. We should probably add a couple more red boxes there.
I have a process question. I feel like I'm always asking this question. What's the timeline on actually updating the strategic plan? And are we looking at multiple conversations? Are we just getting all of our feedback in today and then I'll take it and move with it? Or what's the timeline?
If we want to go back to the PowerPoint presentation, it gives the timeline for the strategic plan update. So right now, let me pull that up. So we're looking at, hopefully in July, the new plan will be, council will review it and then adopted. And we do have in your meeting timeline that this is the grant schedule. In February, we'll have another working session to go over data that's been collected and what we're seeing so far. And then before the plan does get approved by council, the advisory committee has to refer it out to council. So you'll see the final product has to be approved by the advisory council before it goes to, before it gets its final implementation.
And I'll just say
add
that.
a follow-up question to that.
Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
Go ahead.
I just did want to say, we don't have to have a hard and fast timeline. If the committee feels that they want to spend more time going back and forth and discussing, we can certainly do that too.
I think ultimately one of the challenges is that there's a certain number of meetings budgeted to discuss this. So other than spending time offline on it, as far as discussing it as a committee, there's only a certain number of meetings, and we have other things to get to as well for the grant program. So being efficient with our time while we're together to discuss is probably a priority for sure. So I know obviously what we provide tonight is important, and then that February meeting is going to probably be doubly important. So that might be an action for everyone on the committee to take, is to spend some time over the next couple of months and really be prepared to discuss some stuff in that February meeting, for sure.
I was just curious to know, just a follow-up question, after the February 5th meeting, when do we plan to have the first iteration of the new or revised plan drafted by? Do we have a dateline for that or a timeline?
Yes. So right now on the planning schedule, the plan, the draft plan tentatively, hopefully, will be around May, and then the advisory committee will review that draft in June.
Thank you very much for that information.
You're welcome.
Continuing with your question two of what is potentially missing from the document, if you scroll up to the pillars, it's I think 2 pages above where you are. Yes, there you go. So I was thinking, education, lifestyle, care, mobility, lifestyle, landscapes. That's nice. Things that I was thinking could be added are access. So whether that's language access, access to secure housing. There's so many things that could go under access. But I felt like those items were potentially missing, because it's great to have good education. Do we have access to that education that we've provided? Things like that. And then, so access. And then empathy from outside neighbors. I wasn't entirely certain how to phrase this, but if we don't have a whole community understanding that, these priority neighborhoods need our help as humans. These are humans that need their dignity and their humanity, and we need empathy from outside neighbors, as opposed to, the flip side of that one would be citizens who are not living in priority neighborhoods who are thinking, oh my gosh, why are we spending so much money on priority neighborhoods? I felt like that was a pillar that could potentially be thought about adding as something that is important towards the health of these priority neighborhoods. Along with those additions, I was confused about what care meant. So care was defined as work to build and maintain neighborhoods in which adequate care, what is that, is available and accessible to residents. So specificity there.
I think that draws in line with the healthy lifestyle. And as you were kind of going over that thought of yours, it kind of dawned on me that there's a lot of inconsistency in the pillars and how they're awarded across the entire plan, particularly the chart that we just visited before this one, where you kind of introduced, health, being a major factor that should be included in that section. However, in the pillar, health is clearly very well highlighted as well. And I think some of this can be better condensed, or we can find better synonym words to compile them together to capture the same message while keeping our pillars as high overview as possible. But thanks for pointing that redundancy as well within the pillar.
Yeah, there are two things that I wanted to add to this section as well. I know down in the healthy landscapes, we have high quality and diverse housing stock. But if there's one thing that the council's been talking about over the last couple of years, it's housing. And I think housing should be called out as a separate pillar and not just left as an afterthought that we throw into this landscape, kind of catch-all category. The other thing that is absolutely a pillar that we have talked about on this committee is food security. There's no mention of that anywhere in here unless that's supposed to be lumped under care. But, even if we look at the Healthy Neighborhood grants that we awarded last year and the year before and the year before, the food security issues are the issues that are driving what's going on in these neighborhoods. And that's important. It's important for us to call that out as a separate thing and make sure that all of these neighborhoods right now are essentially food deserts. And we need to do something about that.
Yeah, agreed. When we had the neighborhood navigator come speak with us, I think that was about this time last year, I believe, as well as any of the grant awardees and other community organizations over the last year or so. Those were the two main categories of need that they expressed to us were housing and food security. So I think those should definitely be heavily featured items talked about in the strategic plan. Again, with the understanding that the plan has to be high level, but those probably should be their own pillars, I would imagine.
Could you repeat again who reported that?
So it was late last year. We had our neighborhood navigator come speak with us, and then we had numerous organizations, and I'd have to refer back to that meeting, or I think it was two different meetings, where we had different organizations and community folks come and spend some time with us, telling us what they were seeing in the neighborhoods as far as need. I know there were several grant awardees who came to speak with us about that in particular. And of course, they're going to have a specific perspective when it comes to, telling us what they're seeing as an organization, for example, that provides access to fresh food. So clearly, the people that are coming to them are probably going to make that a priority item. So there is that to be said. But, in particular, the neighborhood navigator talked a lot about housing security, for sure, and that's something that our grant program has up until now not really addressed a bunch. And of course, the grant program is only one of the parts of this Healthy Neighborhood Initiative, but that's something that we've discussed as well. As part of the grant program, but also as part of the strategic plan, we need to make sure that we're focused on these priority neighborhoods getting access to and assistance with housing in some way, shape, or form.
Yeah, I'm glad you mentioned that, and the reason that's why I asked the question is because one of the things that it just seems that everybody has talked about comes to the theme for me is the community aspect. To me, seems to need to actually be a pillar because it doesn't seem there's any actual community. It seems very savior complex where we're coming up with a lot of our own thoughts and feelings and folks that are coming to us that are applying for the grants to serve what communities need. And yes, we take the time to hear what people are utilizing the funds for, and based off their interests and what they may think the community is needing. But how are we getting any information from those that are actually living in the neighborhoods, and especially in these neighborhoods? At least two of them. You know, you got Boys and Girls Club, and you got Meadowwood that are actually serving community and working with students every single day and families every single day. Where is there any space to actually be involved in community and hear community aspect about what they want and need, and maybe helpful within their community, and then hopefully then drive some of those initiatives from either the organizations that are already applying for grants, or even try to seek out other folks to apply for grants that may be doing that work as well. But I think that is something that is heavily missing here. Is not once have I seen or heard of anything of folks that are actually living in the communities.
Yeah, I think we had we had talked a few meetings ago about a survey going out to the public. I think one of the, in your presentation tonight, there was talk about focus groups. Having an opportunity to get out and gather that data from folks that live in the community is probably something we need to do more as a committee. How that looks, I'm not entirely sure, because that would be outside the scope of our meetings here, right? So that would involve a little bit of a field trip sort of style if we as a committee are going to go out into the communities, or we'd have to figure out a way to put on some sort of an event, which would require additional resources. So I'm not sure how that looks, but I agree that having additional input from people that live in the community every day is going to give us a better idea, because otherwise all we have is what we have as our own personal lived experience, which can be useful. My family has dealt with housing instability before, and we are a Habitat for Humanity family, so we very much have that perspective, but I don't also have the perspective of many of the other people who are my neighbors.
I have a question.
And go ahead.
But, yeah, you go ahead.
Somebody go ahead.
Whoever go ahead.
Okay.
I wasn't going to say anything important.
Sure.
I'm wondering about these pillars because, like, the things that we're talking about are so wonderful, and I hear us using words that are maybe not the words that we've got here as pillars already. So I wonder if it makes sense that we're like adding to the list, or I feel like at this point we're kind of making the list super long. So things that I've heard us talk about: food, housing. I talked about language access, employment, community belonging, childcare, after school activities, maybe education is already there, transportation, mobility, that's there. Are we interested in keeping things like life skills and care? Are those already covered with what we've talked about? Healthy lifestyles, healthy landscapes, are those too generic of categories? Do we prefer having these other categories that we've talked about? I'd love for the list to make sense, but also kind of be concise.
Well,
Ari, I think we can, if I may, I think the purpose would not be to to redefine the pillars today, right? I believe we have future meetings to further discuss and actually boil down to the meat and bone of exactly what terminologies, what word phrase, what examples we want to use to capture the pillar very most efficiently. And majority of the discussions that we've had today and the points that have been brought up today are just to help us facilitate the thought process when we go back and revisit this document to better align ourselves with exactly what we envision for the document itself and our pillar as a community, or committee rather. I was actually going to draw further collaboration to Jay's comment. I believe I'm looking at page number 9 here, and at the bottom of that page, which it's the soft data. So we've got hard data, and then right below soft data, page number 9. Right below there, it says the following identifies various priority neighborhood events and gatherings for neighborhood planning initiatives from which data are gathered directly from priority neighborhood residents. And I think this section can be further updated to introduce new and different avenues in which we intend to actually capture the community need as well.
Thanks for pointing that out.
Yeah, that's a great list.
It's making me wonder, yeah, because that, and then on to page 10, then we do have some of the data from conversations with residents, which I think is also helpful with the prominent themes on page 10. I'm also wondering, I think that maybe part of the strategic plan outlines what our process is for being in communication with residents who live in our priority neighborhoods, right? So it's not just the data that comes from residents, but it's actually built into our process. How are we making sure that our decisions are guided by the needs within the neighborhood? So I'm not quite sure where that would fit in, but I think it seems to be a really common and important theme in this conversation is that we need to actually outline and be clear on what's guiding us, and that's the needs of people, residents in the priority neighborhoods.
Yeah, sometime between now and when we submit our final version of this, I think we should have a meeting, a neighborhood meeting in each one of these neighborhoods where we can actually have residents come in. We'll need a translator and talk with us about what they see. It seems I've been involved in Fitchburg government for 30 years now, and one of the things I've been unhappy with is the way we communicate with our residents, which is inadequate at best. And unfortunately, the referendum failed, and so we had in the referendum package a communications specialist to try to help coordinate some of these things. But I had proposed it in my budget in 2010 when I was the mayor to hire a coordination specialist, and there wasn't any appetite among the council for even including that in the budget when we had money to do it. So this is something that we need to work on. And this is probably going to require, I mean, in Southdale, there's the Doxa Church where we could hold meetings. They've been very open to having the city have meetings there. I'm sure there are other locations in the other neighborhoods. I'm not as familiar with them, but, there just have to be places where we can do that. And I mean, going back to the pillars, I think like that pillar that says care, I agree with Ari that that's just something that doesn't have any meaning. And even with the pillar principle there, it still doesn't really tell us anything. I totally understand the idea of having the satellite view of this rather than getting into the nitty-gritty specifics. but I think we need some specifics in order to have any of this make sense. So we probably need, I think this pillars section, if we're going to keep it in here, it probably needs to be closer to the beginning of the document, because this is what the document is about. And then I think we need to have a reasonable description of each of these things that we think are important in these neighborhoods, and how to, some ideas maybe we can throw in there. And they're going to vary based on the neighborhood, of course, but some ideas of what we can do to accomplish those goals and keep these pillars standing.
Yeah, I mean, the table that we already kind of talked about as far as the indicators does have some example activities and things related to the pillars and the principles within those pillars. But again, the formatting of it makes it a little bit difficult to consume. But I definitely think those need updating and revamping and making them easier to read.
I love the idea of having the pillars up front as kind of like, what are we working on? And then I identified on what is currently page 16. It talks about what is Fitchburg doing to move towards healthy neighborhoods. Some of the items there would be great for like a mission section. It says the initiative is data-driven, partner resilient, proactive, and outcome-based. And then like that section kind of felt like it was really helpful towards understanding what is it that we want to be doing in this committee, especially with item number 4 in that list, enhancing quality of life for those living, working, and recreating in the city. So like that kind of general overview of like what do we actually want to do, like what is our mission, I felt like that could be really helpful to have up front as well.
Yeah, that whole section could be easily revamped into a mission and visions section for sure.
Could I share like some wordsmithing comments?
Yeah.
I know I don't work kind of all over the place. I don't know if this is the moment for it, but I'm looking at page 1. There's a few things in the document that feel off, and this is one of them for me. On the bottom of the page, it says healthy neighborhoods are important because, and the first item there is that unhealthy neighborhoods basically are a drain on resources. And that just felt off to me. It feels like healthy neighborhoods are important because people deserve to live in a healthy neighborhood. And to start out with the burden of unhealthy neighborhoods kind of gave a tone that problematized people living in unhealthy neighborhoods. Unhealthy neighborhoods, which I also think is like probably a term just not to use. So that was one. There's some, and I think this is probably maybe a conversation for another time. I'm not sure. I understand that percentage of white people living in a neighborhood is going to impact access for people, but there's a couple points about an indicator being how many white people live in a neighborhood, related to segregation, and then diversity of neighborhood, which I also think, again, if we have a broader audience, and even if not, clarifying what is meant by that would be important, because I also think that can come off as, whatever. It doesn't sound right to me. So those are just a couple things just to return to. I think I wouldn't want to move forward with it without really understanding what we mean by those indicators.
Yeah, when I looked at that, I don't know how to fix it, but it did bother me because I don't like identifying. I don't like identifying neighborhoods based on race. I think a better metric and a better thing that helps us, because a white person living in a lower income neighborhood and an African American living in a low income neighborhood have the same needs. It's not that their race creates a radically different set of needs. So I think the issue is that it's a low-income neighborhood, and because of the way our society is structured, if you don't have a lot of money, you're really, really limited as to what you can do. So I think the issue is, and granted, with different groups of people, you might have language barriers, you might have other things, but I think the main issue is how do we help equalize the scale, and that's what I think we should be driving for. Is not. I don't like identifying race as a barrier, even though maybe there is, there's obviously discrimination that happens. There's plenty of racism that happens. I don't like putting in a formal city document that this is a barrier, but maybe we need to. I don't know, but that just really bothered me when I ran across it, and to have it the first thing on the list bothered me even more.
I think that it's really important for us as a group to recognize the history and the interconnectedness of poverty and race at this point in U.S. history. And I think that if we took race out of this list of 8 items, then we would be doing a disservice to the communities, to be perfectly honest. And I think it's okay for us to be uncomfortable with this. I do like the suggestion of not having it first. I really like the idea of tying these items to the pillars, in which case we would have, whatever pillar is listed first. Maybe that's education, maybe that item would be first. I would like to say that we should not take race out of our considerations.
Yeah, I might have been misunderstood or not clear on that in terms of what I was advocating. I think if we look at page 8, barriers to opportunities, racial homogeneity, I'm just not sure what's referenced there. I know, for example, and this is such it's like a small and huge point, right? But my neighborhood is not homogeneous, but there's not a lot of white people. And so I think that's Southdale. And so I think just being clear on what we mean when we're talking about race, so not removing it, but just being clear on what we mean, I think is kind of what I'm advocating for, again, for another conversation, but not to remove that as a factor.
I actually found that table on page 8 to be incredibly unuseful to me. It didn't provide me any data. It said hard data, and then there was no hard data. And yeah, I mean, barriers, these are just things that people told us, but there's absolutely no description. Like, what does that mean? Racial homogeneity. Why is that a barrier? Like, give me more data, give me more information there. Yeah.
Keep in mind, for page number 8, there is a footnote that does specify that the prominent themes identified in the above following tables are not intended to be an exclusive comprehension of all data gathered, but rather representation of major priority neighborhood issues, opportunity aspect, and deficiencies identified through the data generating process. Just wanted to point that out as well. And in addition to supporting a few of your comments and statements as well, race can be, introduced or sustained within the documentation, but it's a matter of how is it used, which is why I love the other point that proper clarification and identification of words and how they are actually used and the intended meaning would make a whole lot more sense. Like, for example, looking at this particular page, barrier/access to opportunity, race homogeneity does not necessarily solve that problem, right? In all neighborhood, including the priority neighborhood as well. So that factor, for example, doesn't really correlate with the intended theme or data that's supposed to be driven by that statement or by that bullet point. Yeah, but outside of that, I think, as previously discussed or as just mentioned, I think we just need to be more insightful as to how we're tying our attribution to data in particular and what data we're saying are the most valuable or most important for us to use as a considering factor when addressing our pillars and our, neighborhood needs as well.
That is a lot of great feedback on the current plan that we have. And like I said, we'll be updating the plan, so you guys will get another totally new draft of the plan that we will be working through. This next question is more about the planning process and how we go about it, to making sure that when we update this current plan, voices are heard and we're doing it to the best of our abilities. So as we know, neighborhoods change and we want to ensure that this updated plan is adaptable to these changing neighborhoods. How can we ensure that this happens in the updated plan?
Well, I think the easiest way to do that is to have this committee review it more often than once every 6 years. I mean, if this is the 2019 draft, and I don't know who put this plan. I don't know who put this together, the 2019 plan. I know it was approved by a council at the time that was not very. It was not in touch with the needs of people who live in lower incomes. It was not really interested in dealing with things, and I think we see a lot of that in the language here, that they're just not. I mean, the fact that I was not as in touch with things 6 years ago as I am now, but I know for a fact that food insecurity has been an issue in all of these neighborhoods for all of that time, and that is mentioned nowhere in this document. So that's why I think it's important that we try to meet people in these neighborhoods, because they know what their needs are. They know what's going on there, and so I think that would be another thing that maybe we should do is maybe this committee can. There's no rule in the city ordinances that say that our committee meetings have to be held in this room every time we hold a meeting. So maybe we can move our meetings. I do want to try to get us to meeting every month. I want to add the 4 meetings that currently aren't in the budget. But I think we need to move, maybe once a year, just have our meeting in one of these neighborhoods and invite everybody there to come and tell us what's going on. Because, that's our job as members of this committee. And unfortunately, because of decisions that were made before, most of our meetings happen in this building, which is not accessible. As Bill was pointing out, 30% of people in the city don't have a car. And they couldn't get here. I mean, there's not even a hard way for them to get here. Maybe taking an Uber or a Lyft, but that gets expensive. So maybe we need to take the show on the road and get more direct input from the residents of these neighborhoods.
Yeah, I like that idea. I like setting the intention for the committee to look at the strategic plan more often, perhaps biannually, maybe every 2 years might be a good time period, and updating that section that talks about the data gathering from various events and organizations certainly needs to be updated, and perhaps an intention set to be more active rather than being just every time we need to update it, being a yearly thing, to reach out to those meetings or attend them as individuals or as a committee.
Again, thank
question, and we don't have to go into a long. One question I had about this, as this whole H&I event or program has been developed, in pages 13 through 15, there are 2 case studies. So my question was, were those consultants that we used to create this program? Does anybody know? And on top of that, do we still have any connection to those organizations about, maybe, how we develop as an organization, and or how we even develop this I can't think of my words, this document as well. Obviously, I'm just looking for a yes or no answer, because I know this is a whole other conversation.
Taking a closer look at the document, I think we just actually pulled that from Purpose Built Community, PBC, and they have a source link to this particular case study. I'm not sure if this case study was performed purposely for this particular documentation or this agenda, or we just taken that to fit our need for this purpose.
Obviously, the second one is Milwaukee, which is obviously right down the street. So that was the purpose of my question. But yeah, we don't have an answer to that. That's fine.
Sorry. It's my understanding that those were just some examples of other types of programs. City staff does not have current relationships with those programs as they exist today, or if they exist today.
Thank you.
All right. Again, thank you all for your feedback. We're going to move on to the department report. So there was a presentation to the Council of the Whole last month before Thanksgiving on the Teen Center, and tomorrow is the last meeting for phase 2 of the feasibility study. The mayor is currently working on determining what the next steps look like, and if phase 3 is approved, it's going to include looking at potential sites. And then an update on the hub. Construction is still underway, and the tentative finish is still September of 2025.
Excellent. Awesome.
Question for you.
Yeah.
Can we highlight what phase 3, can you give me a quick highlight of what phase 3 encompasses for the Teen Center by chance?
We haven't finalized an RFP for phase 3, so staff would need to put together an RFP to go out to identify a consultant to work on that. Broad terms, that RFP would include a look at site selection and a look at whether or not it would be appropriate to build new or renovate or co-locate. We would be looking at what are some of our options to build, essentially.
Is there
Thank you.
there needs to be a vote on it though prior to phase 3, right? To move on to phase 3, a council vote.
I think right now, Mayor is kind of working through timeline and the next steps. And as soon as the process, as I understand it, would be some direction to staff to prepare that RFP. And then council would need to approve whether to proceed with that RFP.
Thank you.
So there would be some sort of vote at some point. Yes.
Deanna, I just sent you an email because I forgot to do it earlier. So the Parks Department has been working on a redesigned park for the Southdale neighborhood. And they currently have a bubble diagram. Nothing specific has been placed into the bubbles, but if you could forward that on to the rest of the committee so they can take a look at it. We have, in the budget, we have, I think it's $550,000 to, the town didn't do anything with that park over the years. So last year, this year, in 2024, earlier in the year, we repaved the basketball court and improved that. And now we're looking at building a shelter and replacing a bunch of playground equipment. The playground equipment there is just dilapidated and not any good. There's a path that goes from Southdale Park. It's not a path you would want to. It's not a path that I'm particularly pleased with walking up. It's clearly not ADA. It's very steep grade, but it's a winding path that goes up to the top of the hill, which empties out onto a parking lot that's, I think it's behind the, it's kind of behind where the pawn shop used to be. And that gives residents access to that pedestrian bridge that goes over to Badger Road. We're going to do some additional lighting on that path so it's a little bit safer and try to do some, hey, there it is, look at that. And try to do some other things. So this is the current concept of what the park will be. The Parks Department's working with I guess the process for this is all new to me now, but apparently our Parks Department doesn't actually design the park. So they go out and they find people they find a company who does playground equipment, and they will actually do a couple of designs, send them back to us, and we'll go through that process. But that's kind of what we're looking at. We're looking at putting in a shelter with restrooms because it is a pretty big park, and some water features. There's a potential splash pad idea. It would be smaller than the one at McKee Farms Park, and 2 different play areas, one for smaller kids and one for medium-sized kids, I guess. So that's what we're looking at over there.
Excellent. Okay. All right. Well, report from department is over with. So I guess the last section would be any announcements. Is there anybody else with any announcements? No? I guess I'll just mention, I did send an email to the committee members earlier today that I had submitted my resignation from the committee, effective at the end of this meeting. So I just wanted to say thank you to all of the committee members and to staff for helping me muddle through. The last 2 years have been pretty fantastic, and I think we're in a really good place to continue moving forward. So I will certainly be back on the other side of this seating arrangement to speak with you about my personal opinions as a citizen. I'm sure as we go along, but yeah, thank you very much. So that is it. So that said, I guess we will, entertain a motion to adjourn.
Well, I will make a motion after I say that we will miss you. You've been a valuable member of this committee, and I definitely appreciate your contributions. And with that, I will make the motion to adjourn.
Okay.
Thank you for your service, and I will second.
All right. All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
I
All right. Meeting is adjourned. Thank you all very much.